They called my small bakery a joke before the first loaf had even cooled. Not strangers. Strangers were kinder. The people who laughed were the ones who said they wanted me to succeed, as long as success stayed small enough not to threaten their idea of where I belonged. My name is Adrian Miles. I'm a black man from Charleston, South Carolina, and when I opened Sweet Harbor Bakery, I was 36 years old, recently laid off from a luxury hotel kitchen, and tired of watching men with softer hands and louder last names take credit for recipes that came from people like my grandmother. I started with one narrow storefront between a laundromat and a barber shop, two ovens bought used, a cracked tile floor, and a hand-painted sign my niece made because I could not afford a designer. My family said they were proud, but the pride sounded worried. My former boss said it was brave, and in his mouth, brave meant foolish. The hotel people laughed the hardest, the same hotel that had let me work 12-hour days creating pastries for guests who never knew my name. The same hotel whose executive chef once told me my sweet potato brioche was too ethnic for the lobby menu, then served a safer version of it at a private event and accepted compliments like he had dreamed it up himself. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from today, and if you believe the people who mock your beginning should not be surprised when your name becomes the thing they need. Stay with this story until the end. The hotel was the Belmont Grand, a white-columned luxury property near the waterfront, owned by the Harrow family for 3 generations. The Harrows were the kind of wealthy white family who talked about Southern hospitality while paying the people who created it just enough to stay tired. I worked there for 9 years. I rose from prep cook to pastry lead without ever getting the title or salary that matched the work. The executive chef, Preston Vale, loved saying I had natural talent, which meant he never had to admit I had studied, practiced, failed, learned, and earned skill through discipline. When I asked for promotion, he said I needed more polish. When a younger white chef from Atlanta arrived with half my experience and became pastry director, Preston said the hotel needed a more refined face for the brand. Refined face. I knew exactly what that meant. Everyone did. Nobody said it out loud because racism in places like the Belmont Grand wore linen jackets and spoke softly. I left 2 months later. Preston told people I was emotional. The hotel's owner, Charles Harrow, told a vendor I had made the mistake of confusing kitchen work with entrepreneurship. His daughter, Marielle, who managed guest experience, saw me at a farmer's market before the bakery opened and asked if I was doing cupcakes now. I told her I was building a bakery. She smiled the way people smile at children selling lemonade. "That's sweet," she said. Sweet Harbor opened during a thunderstorm. The street flooded at the curb. The card reader failed twice, and my first customer was Mrs. Alvarez from the laundromat next door, who bought 1 cinnamon roll and came back 10 minutes later for 6 more. The first month was terrifying. Some days I sold out by noon. Other days I stared at trays of unsold biscuits and wondered whether pride had convinced me to ruin my life. I slept 4 hours a night, mixed dough before sunrise, delivered wholesale orders in my own car, and fixed the front door with duct tape because repair money had gone to flour. But the neighborhood came. Barbers, nurses, teachers, construction workers, church ladies who argued about whether my pound cake needed more lemon, college students who posted photos online, old men who sat by the window with coffee and treated the place like a porch with better chairs. I learned that a bakery is not just a business. It is a morning ritual people trust you to get right. The first big break came from a food blogger who wrote that my brown butter cornbread croissant tasted like Charleston arguing with Paris and winning. That line brought tourists. Then a regional magazine came. Then a food festival invited me. Though they placed my booth behind a tent and spelled my name wrong on the program, I won anyway. The next year, Sweet Harbor was named Best Bakery in the state by a national travel magazine. Suddenly, people who had called it cute began calling it a concept. Investors emailed. Restaurants asked for bread. Hotels asked for breakfast pastries. I said yes carefully. Growth can flatter you into losing the thing people came for. I hired slowly, trained properly, and paid more than anyone told me was smart. My first employees were people other kitchens overlooked. A single mother who decorated cakes like stained glass, a retired school cafeteria baker with better instincts than most chefs I knew, a young white kid with anxiety who could laminate dough perfectly because repetition calmed him, and my cousin Tasha, who could run a front counter like a courtroom. We built the brand without pretending it came from nowhere. Every box had a small note inside, built from memory, butter, and people who deserved credit. The Belmont Grand noticed around year 4. Their reputation had started slipping. Guests complained the food felt dated. A new boutique hotel nearby was getting press for partnering with local black-owned and women-owned food businesses. The Belmont tried to rebrand as authentically Charleston, which was funny because for decades they had treated the actual city like something that should enter through the service door. Then their biggest conference client threatened to move a major culinary tourism event unless the hotel featured a recognized local bakery. That was when Marielle Harrow emailed my office, not called, emailed. Subject line, partnership opportunity. My assistant forwarded it with 3 question marks. I read it twice, then laughed alone at my desk. The Belmont Grand wanted Sweet Harbor to become its exclusive bakery partner for guest welcome baskets, conference breakfasts, and a lobby pastry bar. They wanted my name, my recipes, my story, and my credibility. The same brand they once said I did not have the face to represent. I agreed to a meeting, not because I needed them, but because sometimes closure arrives wearing a proposal deck. The meeting took place in the Belmont's private dining room, where I had once stood during events hoping no one noticed flour on my shoes. Charles Harrow sat at the head of the table, older now but still performing authority. Marielle sat beside him with a folder and a smile that had been professionally trained. Preston Vale was there too, the executive chef who had replaced me, though his face had the tight look of a man forced to watch history sit down across from him. "Adrian," Charles said, extending his hand, "it's good to see you doing so well." I shook it. "Thank you." Marielle began the pitch. She spoke about alignment, heritage, local authenticity, elevated guest experience, shared values. I listened politely, then she showed a mock-up of a lobby sign. Belmont Grand presents Sweet Harbor by Adrian Miles. I looked at it for a long moment. By Adrian Miles, I said. That's new. Preston shifted in his seat. Marielle's smile flickered. We believe your personal story is central to the brand. My personal story includes this hotel refusing to promote me while using my recipes. The room went quiet. Charles cleared his throat. I think that's a harsh characterization. It's an accurate one. Preston leaned forward. Adrian, come on. Kitchens are collaborative. We all borrow. I looked at him. Borrowing is when you return something or at least say who owned it first. His face reddened. You left on your own. After being told the hotel needed a more refined face for the brand. Marielle looked at Preston sharply. Charles's jaw tightened. We are not here to relitigate old personnel issues. No, I said. You're here because your hotel needs the brand built by the person those old personnel issues pushed out. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Marielle closed her folder. When she looked up, the polished smile was gone. You're right, she said. Charles turned to her. Marielle. She ignored him. You're right. The hotel treated local talent like labor when it should have treated it like leadership. We are paying for that now. Preston looked furious. I studied her carefully because honesty in that room sounded almost foreign. What are you asking for exactly? I said. A partnership, she answered. Not ownership, not control, not a white label arrangement. Your brand, your recipes, your standards, your staffing authority, your profit share, your name. And if I say no, then we deserve it. That surprised me. Charles did not like it. Preston hated it. But Marielle had apparently learned something expensive enough to make her truthful. I told them I would consider only under strict terms, full public credit, no recipe ownership transfer, Sweet Harbor staff leadership on site, living wages for every bakery worker assigned to the hotel, a scholarship fund for young black culinary students funded by the Belmont. A written acknowledgement that several signature items originated from my work during my time at the hotel. Charles nearly choked on that last condition. That sounds like an accusation. No, I said. It sounds like a correction. Preston stood. This is absurd. Marielle looked at him. Sit down, Preston. He did not. We do not need to let him hold the hotel hostage over a pastry program. I smiled slightly. You're right, you don't. You can call another bakery. The silence after that was beautiful, because everyone in the room knew they had. The other bakeries either lacked the recognition or refused the Belmont's terms. Sweet Harbor was not just the best option, it was the one their client had specifically requested. Preston sat down. The agreement took 3 months. Lawyers argued. Charles resisted. Marielle pushed. I walked away twice. Both times they came back. The final contract gave Sweet Harbor everything I had demanded and more. The public announcement received major press. Belmont Grand partners with Sweet Harbor Bakery and historic culinary collaboration. Historic was a dramatic word, but I understood why they used it. A hotel that once treated me as replaceable now had to put my name in its lobby to stay relevant. Opening morning of the pastry bar, I arrived before sunrise, just like I had when I worked in the back kitchen years earlier. But this time I walked through the front entrance. My staff came with me. Tasha oversaw service. Mrs. Lang, the retired cafeteria baker, inspected the display case like she was judging souls. The young kid with anxiety, now a lead baker, checked the croissants and whispered, "They better not mess with our lamination." I told him nobody would survive trying. The lobby filled by 8. Guests lined up for sweet potato brioche, brown butter cornbread croissants, praline morning buns, bene seed shortbread, and coffee roasted by a local black-owned company we brought into the deal. A small plaque beside the counter explained Sweet Harbor's history and acknowledged the culinary traditions behind the recipes. My grandmother's name was there. So were the names of my first employees. I stood back and watched people read it. That mattered more than watching them buy. Preston resigned 2 months later. Officially, he left to pursue consulting. Unofficially, the correction made staying uncomfortable. Charles remained stiffly polite whenever he saw me. Marielle and I developed a careful professional respect. She was not suddenly a hero. People do not become heroic because market forces finally teach them humility. But she did the work. She kept the wage commitments, funded the scholarship, and defended the partnership when old board members complained that the hotel had given away too much power. One afternoon after a successful culinary conference, she found me in the lobby near the pastry bar. "I should have said something years ago," she said. "About Preston, about the refined face comment, about all of it." "Yes," I said. She nodded. I was afraid of my father and comfortable with the system because it still worked for me. That was clean, no decoration. "Thank you for saying it." "Does this partnership feel like justice?" she asked. I looked at the line of guests, at my team moving with confidence, at a young black culinary student taking notes near the counter for her scholarship interview. "Not justice," I said. "Leverage." Marielle smiled sadly. "That may be more honest." Sweet Harbor grew again after the Belmont deal. We opened 2 more locations, launched a packaged biscuit mix, and started a training kitchen for people who could not afford culinary school. The scholarship fund sent its first student to a pastry program in New York, though she came back after graduation because, as she told me, Charleston still needs seasoning. I hired her. Years later, the original bakery still sat between the laundromat and the barber shop, though we bought the building and fixed the cracked tile without replacing all of it. The hand-painted sign my niece made remained on the wall inside, crooked and sacred. People sometimes asked why I kept it when the brand had become polished enough for hotel lobbies. I told them beginnings should stay visible because success has a way of trying to edit out the struggle. One rainy morning, just before opening, I stood alone in the original shop while bread cooled on racks and the street outside shone under gray light. I thought about the people who had laughed, Preston, Charles, Marielle once, maybe silently. Former colleagues who thought a storefront beside a laundromat was a fall from grace. They had called my bakery a joke because they could not imagine value unless it arrived through rooms they controlled. Years later, their hotel needed my brand because the world had changed. Yes, but also because I had refused to let their laughter define the size of my dream. The joke was never the bakery. The joke was believing talent stays grateful forever when denied ownership. Sweet Harbor began small, but small is not the same as insignificant. Seeds are small, matches are small, keys are small. Some of the most powerful things in the world fit in your hand before they open a door. My bakery opened one, then another, then enough doors that even the Belmont Grand had to walk through mine.